the rest of the course isn't going to mean much, and we'll be playing the whole time playing catch up. So that's why you're going to get a quiz today. And the quiz is going to be supplemented with some more instruction, and you'll even get a chance to revise it if you blew it on the first try. Right? A chance to revise it today. So be present. Okay? Don't just be in your seat. Be present, because this isn't lots of the things are important, but our ability to use this idea, not just to have this idea in our heads, but to use this idea that we're always learning more than one thing at a time, I think is really important. There's another idea that is up here on a claim board that has come up before as well, which I want to just keep alive in the background, and that's what learning is like in the wild. And it's the difference between the tree and the ladder, or the leaf and the ladder. We talked about this a ton, so I won't repeat the lesson. Frankly, at some point that's going to be insulting to you, as we keep saying the same thing. But one thing I'll add to it is just a clarification that if you're going to learn something well, that is, if you're going to master something, it's not just that this kind of tree-mapped learning is how it is in the wild. That's actually the claim that I'm making, is that that's also corresponds with expertise. That when you know something well, you haven't just moved through it quickly and efficiently, is that you've made the mistakes already. There's a story, it's probably apocryphal, about a ceramics instructor who divided her class up into two groups. One group, she was going to assess on the quality of the pot that the group made, right? And they had all quarter or semester, whatever it is, all class long, to worry about designing the perfect pot, because they were going to be assessed on quality. The other half of the class was going to be assessed on quantity. The more pots they made that didn't break, that were functional, the more pots they made, the higher their score. Again, it's probably apocryphal, but it makes a nice point. In other words, it's probably a make-up story. Like, I don't know if it really happened. I haven't been able to verify it, although it's pretty told in other places. The side that had the quality side, right? It was going to be assessed on quality. Remember? So they got all quarter long to design it, learn it, really try to get the perfect pot. On the side that got remember the quantity side, they make as many pots as you can that don't break. The surprise was at the end, the highest quality pot came from the group that was going to be assessed on quantity. That is, the highest quality pot didn't come from getting it right all the way through. The highest quality pot came from making all the mistakes over and over again until you eventually got a great pot. And again, it's probably a made-up story, but it's nice food for thought. Right? That's what this is designed to get at. One part of this idea. Right? It's not just learning in the wild looks like this. It's more like what you want is expertise, if what you want is mastery, if what you want is real deep learning of anything, your pathway through it is more likely to be branched than it is to be single file. Okay? So I want this idea in the background. Now, coming back to, we're always learning more than one thing at a time. Okay? There's more to this. I want to emphasize one part that so far I'm afraid we've underemphasized. So here's what's coming. Okay, I'm going to give you a different account of what it means to be a learner, a human being, by reference to some science, believe it or not. And then we're going to try out that idea with some fun. So, school and noise. This is some review. This will go quickly. You know this definition of education. I don't need to spend much time on it. This is Jules Henry. This is probably going to be your quiz today, right? A chapter out of this called Golden Rule Days. I don't need to tell you more about Jules Henry. Or I probably could, but I'm not going to. Okay, this is the book, 1963, late 50s. He does a bunch of anthropological field work in the United States with a team of anthropologists conducting in-depth observations. Okay? And he comes up, one of his big claims in this paper is, in the paper that you've read, he comes up with this idea of noise as a way to describe the other side of this learning encounter, this educational encounter, which might be called the teaching encounter, right? The teaching side of it, not the learning side of it, but the teaching side of it, which is already a little ridiculous because it's as if the teacher's not learning anything, right? So let's not take that division too seriously, but if we just take it as a kind of a heuristic, a kind of a shortcut in, this is the learning side. Well, it's learning more than one thing at a time, put in teaching, or even just communicating, right? Well, it's communicating more than one thing at a time, and that's the noise. We can't help it. His point, you can't help it. I'll say this again, I said it last Thursday. Don't make the mistake of getting a gaucho spacer in your conversation or your discussion sections and saying, I agree with Henry, we need to make it quieter in the classroom. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying that it's too noisy by ears. He's also not saying that we should reduce the noise and just get a single message, although that's what the metaphor asks us to at least consider. It's a sort of disadvantage of the metaphor, because when we're listening to the radio or anything else, we want to reduce the noise. He's saying, he's just using it as a metaphor, as a way in, right? I feel myself distracted by some of you who are not, who are on Facebook. I don't know what you're doing on your computer, but I can just feel that some of you are chinned out. Please don't, or just fake it better. His idea is that there won't ever be no noise. So for us, who's worried about educational encounters, our question then becomes, what else is getting communicated and what else might be taken up as learning? Right? What else besides what we intend? Okay, that's your big review. Now, the part that I said at the beginning of class, I said we've underemphasized, or I've underemphasized something, and I want to make sure to give it the full emphasis today. This you've already had, right? Not mind, body, spirit, heart. These are different ways of dividing up all the things you might be learning more than one thing at a time, right? Think, do, say, make, believe. This has flowed out of my mouth without me even thinking about it. It's probably gotten to the point where you don't even really hear it anymore. That's the risk of saying something over and over again, that it just becomes, I'm going to use noise in a different way, it just becomes noise that you tune out. Okay. I'm going to show you a little video. This is an elevator. I'm going to show you a little video. And before I do the emphasizing something new, I've not done this, any part of this part of the lecture. I've talked about it and written about it in other settings, but not done it in 125 before. So I want to, before we do the emphasizing, I should just tell you, it makes it seem like it's a big secret. The part that we don't emphasize enough, and it's difficult to emphasize, is that one of the things that people are learning is not, it includes more than just what we receive, right? More than one of the things we're learning is relationships with one another. That is, how we are together. Okay? The structure of that relationship, our role in that relationship, the quality of that relationship. We're learning that stuff all the time. And especially, that stuff is especially not taught explicitly. But it may be the most important kind of learning. So I'm going to say it as concisely as possible. It may be that the most important, for our purposes, the most important non-intended kind of learning has to do with our learning how relationships are organized and structured, our place in it, and what that means for our specific relationships with others, who are right here with us. So let's watch a YouTube video and see what this is.
The gentleman?
Okay, you guys know what candid camera is? You ever heard of candid camera? Back in the old days when there was just film cameras, candid camera was it's like a prank thing, right? They would play pranks on people. You guys have seen these videos are so old. None of this is going to be new, but this is a really nice one. Candid camera came in the 1950s and early 60s, and we'll see
in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with a white shirt, the lady with a trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the candid camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups before. is a fella with his hat on in the elevator. First he makes a full turn to the rear and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door, everybody's changed positions. See if we can use group pressure for some good. Now, in a moment, on Charlie's signal, everybody turns forward. There, notice they take off their hats. And now, do you think we could reverse the procedure? Watch.
All right, this is from Prudential, so it's an investment commercial. It's from it's one of the only ways to get the video. The easy thing to do, maybe that's not as funny to you as it is to me. I find it kind of delightful. The easy thing to do would be to compare these people psychologically. Right? First guy, maybe the last guy, kind of strong or weak-minded, right? Easily susceptible to the pressure of others. Maybe the first guy was. Maybe the middle guy was strong, to rank them somehow psychologically. That'll be especially easy to do in 2015, especially if you're, frankly, a psychology major, because a lot of what you do is try to rank people along some metric, right? And that would be easy to do. That's not the point here. The point is not that one person's weak-minded or that other people follow other people, per se. The idea is that this happens with that all the time, right? We're constantly looking to see what other people are doing as a guide for us. Now, the way this video worked is that it's about copying, imitating, right? Conformity and compliance. But another way to think about it is rather than just, I'm going to copy them, just understanding that what we're doing all the time is watching what other people do as a guide for what we're supposed to do. The elevator example is kind of blunt and simple because everybody in the elevator is acting the same way. The bigger point is this is how we figure this stuff out. We're taking cues from other people, and that's a little different than we're always learning more than one thing at a time. It's a better angle on that, which is that we're always attentive in ways that we don't even know to what other people are up to as a guide for how we're supposed to behave. Maybe as not just as a guide for how we're supposed to behave, but as a guide for who we are. As a guide for who we are and what that means for our relationships with other people. All right. So one more little thing, and this is from a great new podcast called Invisibilia. If you haven't checked it out and you have a bunch of spare time, yeah, right. I know you guys don't have a lot of spare time. Okay, the picture is only tangentially related. There's two psychologists up there, emotional psychologists, emotional neuroscience. Did you know there was such a field? I find that fantastic. Right? The neuroscience of emotions. Two professors at University of Hawaii, they get interviewed briefly, and they talk about contagion, the contagiousness of emotional states, not just social and relational structures, but also the contagiousness of emotional states. And this is going to matter when we get to Jules Henry. So let's listen to this podcast. It's about 10 minutes. We'll listen to the first part of it. There will be some reference to the first half of the show. Don't worry about that.
This is Invisibilia. I'm Elise Spiegel.
And I'm Lulu Miller.
And today we are looking at entanglement, the ways which we are all invisibly connected with one another.
Yep, and we just heard this story about a woman who can feel, literally physically feel what other people are feeling. And as sort of nutty and strange as that sounds, this is happening to all of us.
The gentleman in the elevator now.
Same video we just saw.
Star.
Which brings me to a series of famous old clips from the TV show Candid Camera, hosted by Alan Funt.
Here's the candid subject.
Okay, so we see a poor, unsuspecting man walk into an elevator that has been secretly rigged up with cameras.
And
he stands there, waiting for the door to close, when all of a sudden,
here comes the candid camera staff.
two people walk in.
The man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat.
And weirdly, they face the wrong direction. They face toward the back wall of the elevator.
The poor little guy is very confused.
Does the door open the other way?
To help us make sense of what's about to happen to this guy, we brought in two psychological researchers from the University of Hawaii, Elaine Hatfield and her husband/colleague, Dick Rapson.
Aloha.
Aloha. So anyway, back to this guy in the elevator. He keeps on facing in the right direction, despite the two weirdos next to him.
And he looks at both of them facing the wrong way, looking very puzzled.
He looks at his watch.
But when a third person comes in and faces the back wall, the poor little guy can't take it anymore.
Now he turns immediately to the back wall.
And the dance is on.
Now they all turn forward. He turns forward, like all the others did.
Candid camera observed this phenomenon again and again. An unsuspecting victim would walk into that elevator and end up imitating whatever the people around him were doing.
He has a hat on, and the others take off their hats, so he takes his hat off as well.
Now, the first guy's initial slow turn to the wall is what Dick and Elaine call conformity. You don't want to look like a fool when you slowly and consciously decide to follow the group.
That's right.
But sometimes the victim begins following what the people do so quickly that it goes by another name.
Contagion.
Contagion.
Now their elders are turning around, and he turns around right with it. That's an example of contagion.
When the imitation is so fast, it looks
Like it was choreographed. The others are putting their hats back on, and he puts his hat back on.
and you, listening to my voice, do this too. Whether you want to or not, all day long you are engaged in a kind of synchronized dance with the people you come into contact with.
When we watch other people, for some reason we're wired up to get in sync with them on so many things that it kind of boggles your mind.
Some are more obvious, how you imitate people's postures and speaking patterns, but others are quiet. Like how if you're talking to a friend, over time you may begin to blink as one, or if you watch someone stutter, the tiny muscles on your mouth will start to twitch.
And they calculate that it's so fast that you couldn't possibly do it consciously.
Really?
It's gotta be going through the brain stem.
So if you put people in the same room, you'll find that their breathing starts to mimic one another as well.
That's Michael Banassi, the neuroscientist from our last story. Really? Like around a group conference table, we'll all start breathing as one?
Yeah.
It's so wired in and in the primitive parts of the brain that animals do it.
Monkeys, dogs.
Even little birds imitate one another. It just happens. It just runs off like breathing.
And it's not just each other's physical movements we take on, but emotions too. And this is Dick and Elaine's real specialty, emotional contagion.
I'll tell you how we first started to come across the notion of contagion. We were therapists for a while, for about 15 years, and we remember a client who came in who was very animated. She was talking very quickly and energetically, but I found I started to yawn. And Elaine started to yawn. And I said, did we sleep last night? Did you sleep last night? Are you tired? And Elaine said, no, I wasn't tired at all. So why were we yawning? And what we think was going on is that we were picking up underneath her cascade of words, depression.
That was their idea, that the depression was somehow being telegraphed to them non-verbally. So they looked into it and found out that indeed, emotions leak out a person's face in these very measurable, consistent ways called microexpressions.
Split-second expressions of fear,
Grief,
shame,
joy,
sadness.
What Dick and Elaine then added to the equation after years of research is that one way we might contract these emotions is through that same old dance. Because our faces, unbeknownst to us, actually imitate the tiny microexpressions we see on other people, our eyebrows bound in synchrony with someone else's surprise, or droop with someone else's sadness. The strange result is that the corresponding emotion is produced inside us.
That's right.
Because, as has now been well documented, one of the ways that emotions are produced is from the outside in.
I do believe our thoughts are matter.
Which reminded us of that thing that Amanda, the clinically empathetic woman from the last segment, said.
Our thoughts are actual matter, just like our skin and this couch. And I think our thoughts have a ripple effect.
In a sense, she's right.
We get real pale little reflections of what others are thinking and feeling.
And for Dick and Elaine, the result of this realization, of learning about hundreds of experiments in which we so readily contract each other's emotions and thoughts and breath, is that even though you walk around thinking of yourself as an individual,
That we're each individual entities who live in our own universe and control our own universe. I think that's a delusion. Would you agree with that, Elaine?
Yes, I would. We're going to slip in to being like the company we keep.
it's like without quite being aware of it, we are all one organism. A heaving, swirling organism, contracting the feelings and thoughts of the people around us. Which I'm pretty sure is some philosopher's definition of bliss or nirvana. But when Dick and Elaine realized this, it felt like their jobs as therapists got a lot harder.
You give up the hope that you can change everything.
We are so permeable, they came to believe, that if a patient came to them asking how to deal with visits home to particularly toxic environments, families that are extremely angry or alcoholic or depressed, they tell them,
Don't stay with them.
seriously?
Yeah, I think that if you're, say, going home for Christmas, you vow, this time I am really going to behave well. I'm not going to say mean things, etc. I'm going to be so good, I'm just going to listen to them talk for 4 days. Ha ha ha, that is not going to happen. What's going to happen is after 2 hours, you're going to do something awful because you can't help it. And then the rest of the year, you're going to be ashamed of yourself and sorry. So we'd say, forget the hotel thing. At first, they'd say, I couldn't do that. It would break my mother's heart. She would never understand. And the answer is she going to understand when you scream at her after 2 hours and behave in an awful way? Eventually, their mother would get used to it, they'd get used to it, and the family would go well.
In other words, if you are dreaming of a white Christmas, where everything is merry and bright, then, according to Dick and Elaine, after 2 hours' time,
Run.
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 So some of you may be already feeling frustrated that why are we talking about family Christmas dinners and not school and of course on schooling. I think it makes, the podcast makes a few pretty important points that are relevant here. First of all, I don't know that family dinners are, at least theoretically or psychologically, that much different than school. That is, what are they composed of? It's an environment, it's an activity, right? And there's a bunch of people around. And they're all interacting, and we have to make sense of it when we're there, and we have to respond in real time, just like in classrooms. It's an activity. In fact, it's a ritualized activity like so much of school as well. All right, so what are some points? Read some great lines out of here. We're wired up to get in sync with one another. She says that we're wired up to get in sync with one another. We're born waiting to get in sync with one another, right? This goes along with this idea of noise. It goes along with this idea of we're always learning more than one thing at a time. We're always communicating more than one thing at a time. We've got this main message, but we're wired up to get in sync with one another. We contract emotions, thoughts, even breath from each other. We contract these things from one another, right? We have this, so they're making a strong claim, and we don't even need to take the strong claim, that emotions are less an expression of what's inside, right? As much as they are a response to what's coming in, like we're learning, our emotions are outside in rather than inside out. That's a pretty big claim about emotions. There's lots of evidence for this in psychology. The bigger point, I think, is that we're permeable. And she says is we're permeable. And I want to say, not even just permeable, but active in this regard. We're constantly trying to make sense of our environment. What do we mean by environment? Write this down. People are environments for each other. I don't care if you write it down. The point is it's important. People are environments for each other. So if I enter a room where everybody's like this, pretty soon I'm going to find myself doing like this. If I enter a room where people are listening to each other and engaging with one another, pretty soon I'm going to find even my posture will change. I've analyzed hundreds of hours of video of children and grown-ups in schools together, and also out of school, in what I might call educational encounters. And over again, we see this mirroring taking place. It's not just imitating or copying or complying or conforming, it's that we see this kind of mirroring. It's contagious. Right? And that this is, when I say we're always learning more than one thing at a time, this is what I mean. And what are we learning? We're learning who we are, right? What to feel about each other, how it's structured, what's the deal? Like, what's the deal with us being here together? Who are we together now? And that's communicated not by lesson, but by these she says this is a great line, micro expressions. If you don't think these micro expressions are as deeply communicative as the actual message somebody says, I wish I could think of something that would be uniform to all of you, universal to all of you. I think about the difference between somebody saying, good morning, and good morning. It's a slight change in tone, a slight change in intonation, slight small things. This is what I want to emphasize that we're learning all the time, and I'll tell you why after I get through describing what it is. We are learning who you are to me and who I am to you in its most basic form. And this is all the time, every day, from birth till death, constantly assessing who are you to me and who am I to you. And picking up on small cues. My mother is in the middle of grappling with dementia. It's a new thing in our lives. She regularly gets me confused with my stepfather, her ex-husband. How does that happen? I don't look anything like him. He's my stepfather. How does that happen? Well, I believe that what she's doing, I walk in the room and we have an intimate relationship, not a physically intimate relationship, that would be illegal and disgusting. We have an intimate relationship, like I say, hey, Mom. She reads my face and my gesture, and to be honest, she also reads my frustration. I know it. I try to hide it. But she reads my frustration when she asks the same question for the 5th time, or makes the same mistake about what numbers to add up. And I say, Mom, remember? So she gets these cues, and it's no wonder she's answering the question, who are you to me? Close? Angry? Who is that? Maybe it's her ex-husband. She doesn't see him anymore. She's not getting me confused with the person who brings her food. She's not getting me confused with her friend who takes her out to lunch. Never, ever. And I believe that's, on the one hand, a consequence of her dementia, of course. In my mom's case, she's got Parkinson's, her brain is actually shrinking. So I can point to physical changes in her brain matter that would predict some kind of confusion. But the actual confusion that she experiences, in this case, who are you to me? We had this delightful, painful, hysterically funny conversation where for about a half an hour she kept asking me, when did you and I meet? Now let me tell you something about Mom. Mom is totally with it 60% of the time. We're driving the car and she's taking her to the doctor and she's like, wait a second. So when did I meet your father? And I said, which one? She goes, well, wait, what? So we go through my natural father, my stepfather, and she goes, now how did you and I meet? And I laugh and I say, well, I came out of your body on my birthday. And she was like, that's right. Wait a second, she said, are you sure that you and I have never been married? It was a low time for Mom because she couldn't remember everything. I used to have a hard time. Are you sure? She looks at me and I said, I'm sure. She says, because you make a great husband. Oh, right? And I was like, oh, we just got to get to the, I wish I had the presence of mind to be like, oh. And we're sitting in the doctor's office, and she goes, now, wait a second, I just want to clear this up. We've never been intimate, right? And I was like, nah, Ma. She goes, okay, good. Where did that come from? It came from her doing what we all do all the time. Her weakness matched with her great gift as a human being, which is to constantly ask the question, who are you to me and who am I to you? The intimacy, the closeness that she felt, right? As well as the frustration that I expressed, right? The fear she probably felt in that frustration. She's got no control anymore. I have all the control, right? We're doing this all the time. And when we only answer the question, what are we learning, with what kind of information we carry around with us, or what kind of attitude we carry around, we're missing on not just something that's vitally important, but something that's ubiquitous and omnipresent. It's always there. We're always asking it. Even as my mom's brain is shrinking, she's still got this question, who are you to me? Not just who are you, but who are you to me? And who am I to you? And she doesn't ask the question explicitly. Her brain is making sense of it, and she's reading the world. Gets complicated when there's more than one person around, though, doesn't it? Because then I got to figure out, in this room, you got to figure out, think about this room. You're the orange person. Everybody else is blue, including me. You got to figure out not just who you are with one person, who are we to each other, but who are all of us to each other. It's rare that we only have a one-on-one conversation. We got to figure out who's who and who's what. So I'm expanding this question. It starts out like this. Who are you to me? Who am I to you? Which also, by the way, has a future orientation. Not just who are you to me and who am I to you, but who will you be to me and who will I be to you and how should I act accordingly? The minute we go one more person, now it gets complicated because it could be that you're not, that we get teams. We could have all kinds of ways to arrange this. We could have this. This is classroom. It's the best I could do with some colored figures that I made on, Photoshop. This is us today. Bigger, taller, one teacher, many students. You walk in here and you wouldn't even have to know. You could have been blindfolded and turned around and get some forgetful drug. I don't know. And you could walk in here. You don't even have to know you're in a classroom, and you could figure out that there's one person up there and lots. I'm probably one of the lots. The room is set up for you. We're reading each other, but we're also reading the room. Physically reading the room. Read the seats. And if you don't get it on the first try, walk into kindergarten, you don't know where to sit, all it takes is for the teacher to say, crisscross applesauce. We have this on video all over the place. Kids walk in and they're like, the kids who've never been to the school, they're walking in like, oh my God, there's so many toys. I don't know if they do this, but something like happy, like that's my version of like happy dance, right? And then the class starts and they keep doing it. And then the teacher will say, it's time to sit down now. And what the kids do over and over again is they don't go, okay, they look around and find out where everybody else is. Their attention is oriented now. Wait a second. And they see kids sitting down and then they go, and they sit down, crisscross applesauce. Even if they've never said, kids very rarely say, what do you mean crisscross applesauce? They look around. Crisscross, okay. You guys are, some of you celebrated, others of you worried about the whole brain teaching video. Yeah, we should celebrate and worry and figure out in what terms. But the idea that the teacher, that what that's about is the teacher asking the students to conform and somehow how offensive it is, we're doing it all the time. All right, here's another version. This is one, symbolic, I get it, not real people. Like, there's teams. One group's over here, the other group's over here. The minute that I say, let's form teams, that's the explicit way. But it could be that in the middle of a conversation, you pick up that there's one side and another side. And you got to put yourself on one side. What do we learn? We learn what the underlying structure is, right? What are we picking up on? Underlying structure is our position in that structure and what that means for our relationship with others. If you're an orange person, who are you going to trust? Other orange people, right? Why? Because they're kind of like you. You don't even have to have a trust test. You don't even have to have them make a promise and either break it or keep it. We have this also all the time on video. Kids forming teams, like organic teams, and then they tell each other secrets. Like somehow the fact that we're kind of like each other means that I can trust you with my secret. The difference between conformity and contagion, as I understand it, I've not used those terms, I just picked those up and I don't use them. They're kind of new to me too. Conformity, I think they're describing this kind of really explicit, really visible, kind of like, what should I do? I will follow the group. Whereas contagion is the much more subtle, micro, we do it kind of instantly without even thinking, right? So I think in what I'm describing here, in this, it would be more like contagion. Right? Except maybe at the beginning when we actually don't know what the hell we're doing, and then it's sort of more explicit decision making and calculation. I think that's what it gets at with conformity and contagion. The bottom line here is that it doesn't, for me, is that it happens without us even knowing it, that it's not a weakness, that it's actually a strength of being human. We don't have to take a class on how to hang out. We just do it. We don't have to take a class on how to enter an elevator. We just walk in and wait and see what everybody else is doing. There's that. You could feel like look at the difference between these, right? Two sides. One side's better than the other. Majority, minority. Doesn't even matter if the real numbers matter. If you position yourself, like if you learn that this is how it's set up, and you figure out what your position is, right? This is not just I'm going to hang out with and trust the people who are like me if I'm orange. I might actually resent the people who are blue. What about the people in blue? They're not like the people in the orange people, right? What is he talking about, orange and blue? Just a quick review. We're picking up on who we are for each other and what the structure is all the time. So if this is the structure we pick up on, what are the implications for how we regard one another, how we think about each other? The orange people, the people who feel like they're on the bottom and that they're not alone, are going to talk smack about the people up above. They're going to say things like, Mr. Blue thinks he's so hot. Look at him. They're going to find reasons to suspect the motivations of the people up on top. And guess what? The people on top, you know what they're going to feel for the people on the bottom? Without anybody telling them, they're going to feel sympathy. They might even feel contempt. They might feel kind thoughts too, but those kind thoughts are less likely to be, I want to hang out with you kind thoughts, and their kind thoughts are more likely to be something like, how can I help you? As if the people on the bottom are constantly needing your help. We act like this is a psychological phenomenon. I want to say we pick up, it's just psychological on the one hand, we think it, right? But we don't even really think it, we just pick it up, it just feels natural. So, what's the point here? I walk into a classroom and we get this, what am I thinking? Think, do, say, make, believe, all that stuff, right? This is one aspect of it that if we don't announce it is likely to be invisible because it's like a miracle. We do it all the time anyway. If it was conscious, we'd be lost. And we have to make it visible in order to create a more intelligent conversation about schooling, because we got to ask, what are people likely to learn when they enter a scene? And is it good for them? What are people likely to learn? Wait a second, my child may be going to learn about who she is, what the social structure is, and what is that going to make for her relationships with other people. I've told you the story before, how crazy I find it that my oldest daughter doesn't want to help Nate because he's slower than she is. What? She doesn't want to hang out with him. It's ridiculous. I've told you before, Nate's the most interesting kid I know in that whole class. Nobody told her to not want to hang out with him, but I guarantee you that she figured out without anybody telling her what the structure was. Fast, slow, it's school. She knows how many AR points she has and how many Nate doesn't have. And then when she goes to help him, why do you think she learns to hate that? Because I bet if I were to get a camera on Nate's face and read his micro expressions when my delightful daughter comes up and says, I'm here to help, I bet those micro expressions, even if they communicated gratefulness or gratitude, they would also communicate no small measure of resent. Because it's kind of embarrassing to be sore. Contaminates these relationships. I have no illusion that everybody's the same. But if we're all different, the meanings that that can take are variable. Who are you to me? Who am I to you? Always asking it all the time. All right, so what? Well, this is a quick so what, and then we're going to take a quiz. Here's the so what. Remember this? The definition of democracy. Wait a second. Democracy is good for people because it's good for learning. Here's the definition. Democracy, mutual conference and consultation, putting together individual expressions of ideas and wants. Dewey had a lot of it right. He also says the give and take, the exchange of experiences and ideas. What he didn't get, what he doesn't talk about, at least in the paper that you read, he talks about it elsewhere, is how the fabric of the relationships that we have with one another are going to make or break our democratic activity. So what? If I think I'm probably better than you, I think that corrodes the prospects for a democracy. If you think that I think I'm better than you, if you think that I think that I'm better than you, it's likely to be corrosive as well. Your quiz. Any questions real quick on this? No. Sam, you speaking to the group? It looks like you might. So let me be sure. Any questions? Here's your quiz. Pick. Why don't you guys know how these quizzes work? Open note, open neighbor, open door. Pick one of Jules Henry's 5 scenarios. These are the titles, the subtitles that are in the chapter. They are as follows. The Realm of Song, On Hanging Up a Coat, Boris at the Blackboard. It's actually called At the Blackboard, but the kid's name is Boris. Boris at the Blackboard, Spelling Baseball, and Carping Criticism. Describe everything you think could be learned by participants in that scene. Another way to say it is describe, I'll switch it around a little bit, don't get confused. If this is enough for you, that's good, but another way to think about it is what are all the messages being communicated in that scene? In other words, what could be learned by participants in that scene? Mind, body, heart, spirit, values, attitudes, skills, sensibilities, social structure, regard for one another, who they are for each other, etc. Yes? Man, as he says, since we're listing, can it be in bullet points? Yes, it doesn't have to be organized by category. Just make a list. If you find yourself listing skills only, then say, I got to do more. Okay? You have exactly 6 minutes to list as many as you can. If you've read Jules Henry, this shouldn't be too much trouble. 6 minutes. Did you hear what you said? Can we write down things that aren't explicitly stated? My God, yes, I want you. Not only can you, but I want you to. Don't just report what you read. Right? Don't just report what Jules Henry says. You extrapolate from there. Make the list. Your list. Think. All right. So, Realm of Song. Okay. Kids singing off key, no matter what the teacher does. These are the 5 scenarios. This is just pictures that represented there. Obviously, I hope it's obvious, not actually from Jules Henry's writing. On hanging up a coat, where a teacher says, which one of you nice boys would be willing to hang up this kid's coat? Boris at the chalkboard, where there's some turn sharking going on. He doesn't use that term. That is, Henry doesn't use that term, Jules Henry, but get one kid at the chalkboard. Spelling baseball. And carping criticism. Kids figuring out how to give each other criticism in class. I find that the carping criticism example is the one that feels less like I'd find it in class critics today. But certainly something like spelling baseball, or a student at the chalkboard, or hanging up a coat. Let's talk about spelling baseball for a second, right? Just real quick. What does it mean? Some of you wrote about spelling baseball, right? Spelling baseball is, teacher comes up and says, you should all know your spelling words. We're going to divide up into teams, right? And if you get the word right, I have a rule list that I've made up. I've actually played it with classes of students about geography, right? Where I say about countries and their capitals. You guys want to play geography baseball? Let's play it next time on Thursday. Raise your hand if you want to play geography baseball on Thursday. Raise your hand. Why do you look sheepish when you do that? Yeah, some of you don't. Yeah, geography. Raise your hand. Raise your hand if you definitely do not want to play geography baseball. I'll give you 10 chance to study. It'd be fun, right? It's a game. Teacher comes up. The point is, I like to play it. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. I'm not sure what we'll do. Pick captains, maybe, or maybe you don't do pick captains. You just do right. Captains pick teams. You just get numbers. Those of you who really knew your countries and capitals might have been stoked about geography baseball. Spelling baseball is really common. I played a version of it in my own class. I think I told you before. I played spelling basketball, which is you had two opportunities to fail. If you got the word right, you got a chance to throw a piece of paper into the wastebasket. So if you succeeded once, you still had a chance to fail in front of your friends. But it felt like fun. It was a game. So we do this. So what do people learn, right? I say, hey, you guys, I got the captain in the back, another captain over here, probably do a boy and a girl, right? We pick teams. You go to bat. Your team can't help you. You got to spell the word right. If you get it wrong and the other team gets it right, then you get an out, right? What gets learned besides the spelling work? What's that? How to deal with a high-pressure situation. I heard somebody say humor. What's that? Teamwork. You might learn teamwork, right? Especially if you might learn, I'm going to pay attention. Teamwork was one, right? And how to deal under pressure. Spoken like two winners. Absolutely true. And that's not an indictment. That says it makes total sense. Teamwork. Not just the kind of explicit teamwork, which is like, woo, go team. But also how to cheat and not get caught. When the teacher's not looking and you got a student up to bat, we have film of this. One student's at the bat and the teacher's not looking, they do things like, A. C. Everybody's cheating. But also teamwork if you're the other team, man, we're going to work together. You also, on the team, you learn who your lead batter should be, right? So you learn that pretty quickly. What does that mean if you're on a team? It means the person who gets right? Within about 2 rounds of spelling baseball, when somebody else gets the word wrong on the other team, you understand what I'm talking about spelling baseball? And you want to get it right? Within about 2 rounds, everybody on the team that's trying to get the other person out looks to one person. The speller in the group, the leadoff batter. So teamwork, support, who's the best batter, but also how to succeed under pressure. I just want to say unless you don't. Because the people who don't succeed under pressure learn to fear pressure as much as the people who do succeed under pressure learn to love pressure. So when I said, and I don't mean it disparagingly, spoken like two winners, right? When we interview the losers of these games, they say, the minute that you said spelling baseball, I felt dread rise up. And the easy thing for us to say when somebody learns that is, I learned to fear spelling baseball because I might look like an ass in front of my friends. Or maybe what you learn is that this thing you can do super well in private, the minute that you go public, you suck at it. Anybody like that? Raise your hand if you're like that. In private, you'll do fine. Raise your hand high. I know that's kind of ironic. I'm asking the people who don't do well in public to raise their hands high. Raise your hand high if you do better in private than in public. Raise your hand high. Right. I've done this so many times. During summers, I used to teach up until last year. I teach a teacher education class at Stanford. Stanford students, man, they come in, they are told and believe that they are the rock stars. And I say, we're going to play geography baseball. And they go, yes, yes. And every single time, one person, it's almost always the person who's got swagger rolls up and is like, Yeah, I'll take country. You give them a country, and it's happened so often. And they, like, I don't know, it's something like give me a country. What's that? Botswana. What's the capital of Botswana? I don't know either. Anybody know the capital of Botswana? Okay. Cuba. The capital of Cuba, Savannah. Almost every time, the person will roll up and be like, but I got this. Boom, under pressure, no sweat. And you say, Cuba, and they'll say, Santo Domingo. And you go, wrong, and they go, what? Or you'll ask them and they go, they got it, and you ask them and they go, oh, I can't remember. And then they walk off, and as they turn, they go, I know it. But under pressure. Now, the temptation is to say, well, that's just because they're weak. Here to weed it out. Right? I want to say that it's not about weak psychologies, it's about strong psychologies that are trying to make sense of the world and who they are and who other people are to them and who I am to other people and what the organizational structure is. And it just may be that at that moment, on that day, I don't perform up to par, but what I might learn is to fear the very failure that I need to get better. The people who do well learn that they got this. The people who don't do well learn that the next time they might not get it either. And I'm not saying that means we should eliminate competition. I'm saying, is that what we want our children to learn? Is that what we want your child to learn? What else do you learn in spelling baseball? Teamwork, how to perform under pressure, or that you don't like pressure. Teamwork, also how to cheat. What else do you learn? Playing spelling baseball, yes. Who the better spellers are. If it's you, you might also learn that you're up there, that you matter. If it's not you, what do you learn about yourself? Or what might you learn? You might learn, somebody in the class right now is going, and it's too cynical, they're saying what you might learn is you need to work harder. Alright, but you might also learn, if you keep doing that and it doesn't work out, you might also learn that you're never going to be a good speller. You might learn, I'm just not a good speller. Just like I'm just not a math person. Both of those things are out there and available. What else? Playing spelling baseball, yes? A sense of social worth. You learn what the economy of friendship is, social worth. When we have friends, it's painful and amazing and delightful and scary. You get somebody up there who's a captain, and almost always, if one of their friends is a bad speller, you'll see this look being exchanged. Like, man, got you, partner, but, look, when it comes down to it, I gotta pick the speller. It's this funny, like, sorry. You learn what matters on that day at that time. Remember the pictures? The bad spellers over and over again unite. Over and over again. You're a bad speller too, man. I fucking hate this game. You too? Me too, man. Stupid game. I'm up. And then you see those same people who, when they're not up to bat, rejecting the game, just start to sweat.
During this stage, your entire self-worth and merit is marked based on how
Everything's based on how well you... That's what it feels like. Right? And we could say as a teacher, oh, well, look, spelling's not that important. This is just fun. But we can't turn off the noise. Oh, God, that noise again. This is fun. I promise. It's not permanent. You can learn how to spell. How many times do you have to be up to bat? And this is how it works, by the way. I call you up to bat. You come up. You spell the word wrong. And you might eventually get your team going, oh, man, that's okay. You get it the next time. But the first response is this. That's okay, you'll get it the next time. It's not like you only hear the second message, you hear the first two. Oh, I let my team down, and now I'm embarrassed with the sympathy. And the people, by the way, who are giving the sympathy, they're uncomfortable too. We slow down the tape and you see, we slow down the, not tape anymore, we slow down the recording and what you see is this kaleidoscope of expressions on people's faces. Yay! Because if we help somebody actively, then they're on the spot for being helped. Jules Henry's claim is pretty serious. Pay attention to Jules Henry's claim, especially if you're one of the ones at the top, like I was. Jules Henry's claim is that we also learn to hate one another. It doesn't mean everybody gets that message. It doesn't mean everybody hates everybody else, but it's out there as a message. If my failure brings down my colleagues, if I'm on a team and that person fails, I'm going to hate the person who fails, but if I fail, I'm going to hate the person who succeeds. And we see it over and over again. When I ask you a question in this class that you know the answer to, why don't you jump up and raise your hand? I just asked you a question you know the answer to. Isn't that funny? That's a question inside of a question. There's a hand. Yes.
You don't want to be that guy. The person
You don't want to be what?
That guy, the person who always answers the question, or doesn't.
Why not? Isn't it the case that if you have the answer, you're smarter?
No, well, you have to give other people an opportunity to share their wisdom with advice.
How's that going? What do you mean that guy? You don't want to be that guy. What do you mean you don't want to be that guy? Yes. The one who thinks he knows everything. Yes?
When you're always they think that they might think that you think you're better than them, or
You think that they think that you think that we get tied up. Now, some of you are already rolling your eyes. You're just waiting to put your stuff away for 10:45. Why is that? Because you heard that that we're supposed to wind down at a certain time. All this stuff that we do that feels so natural. And that's not just spelling baseball in 5th grade, but that's present for us right now. We need to think about that. As the outgrowth of the miraculous capacity we have for learning who we are to other people, who other people are to us, how to think about other people, how to think about and conceive of an underlying structure that people might fit into, so that when the instructor asks a question in class that you know the answer to, you got to decide. Not just, am I going to be that guy? But is this a good chance to show the professor? If I'm interested, am I supposed to be interested? What? It's a crazy landscape. My question for you moving into the rest of this week is, I'm going to go through all these practices. So we can do the same thing with any of these practices, both big and small. So we learn about who we are to other people, who other people are to us. Do we like that? Now, those of you who decided that whole brain teaching is something you want to think about, I just want to make sure that when you do so, and this is for everybody, and when you do so, I want you to get in the habit of asking the question, what are people learning in this scene and any other scene about themselves and other people? And is that someplace you'd want your own child? And if it is, under what conditions?